Welcome to another week of Salute Your Sports. I'm Kamen Enchev. Joining me, Drew Brackett, Tom Castleman. Guys, another big show today. We'll talk plenty on the Olympics and, of course, NBA and MLB players on the move. All that and much, much more.
Yeah, certainly one of the most exciting deadlines that we've kind of seen transaction periods come into place with NBA free agency a little bit later than it usually is, with their offseason being pushed back. And that coincides right up with MLB trade deadline. So we'll be touching on that and certainly some exciting stuff.
Yeah, we may get to the some football. We them boys. That might be a statement of the week. Who knows? I'll have to think about that one. But we'll start with the Olympics. Common. Who are the best athletes in swimming? What were your storylines that you watched in the pool during these Tokyo Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, I think the star of the games for both America and the world as a whole was Caleb Dressel. The guy was just incredible, winning 5 golds. He won the gold in the 100-meter butterfly, the 100-meter freestyle, the 50-meter freestyle, the 4x100 medley relay, and the 4x100 freestyle. He set the world record in the 100-meter butterfly, the Olympic record in the 100-meter freestyle, and the 50-meter freestyle. And the only race he didn't get a gold medal in was the mixed medley relay, which the USA finished fifth in. But by the time he stepped in the pool, they were way behind. So certainly not his fault. Another big story that I followed in the pool was Kayla Ledecky versus Ariane Titmus from Australia. Titmus chased down Ledecky, beating her in the 400-meter freestyle. Then she also beat her in the 200-meter freestyle. But guess what? Ledecky could have got down on herself, but she bounced back, winning the 800-meter freestyle, the 1500-meter freestyle, and she also swam better than Titmus in the 4x2 relay, which America got the silver, and Australia somehow got the bronze. Great storyline. Lydia Jacoby, the 17-year-old from Alaska, winning the gold in the 100-meter breaststroke. Only one 50-meter Olympic-sized pool in the entire state of Alaska. Her whole teammates going crazy for her. Her high school going crazy for her. And she upset Lily King, who hadn't lost that race in 5 years, settling for the bronze. And in all, America completely dominating the pool was really cool. A lot of 1, 2, 2, 3 finishes, sweeping the 800 and 1500 with Ledecky and Bobby Fink was big. 30 medals for America in the pool. 20 for Australia was second. Great Britain in third with 8. Also 11 golds for USA Swimming. Also the most golds of any country. Absolute domination in the pool for the Americans.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the big individual names, certainly. Kind of something that we've seen that's actually a little bit counter to a theme that we've had in this sports year is the whole theme of upsets taking place. And while that certainly has happened in a couple of individual races, USA Swimming as a whole has been as dominant as it ever has been, even without a certain great all-time great Olympian in Michael Phelps. Kayla Ledecky now, I believe, is the most decorated female swimmer in Olympic history. So kudos to her. I believe 4 gold medals and 1 silver in this Olympics. So absolutely outstanding for Team USA in the pool.
Yeah, and it's always fun to watch the swimming and Caleb Dressel. Of course, we expected him to put on a show, and he certainly did. He's one of the best sprinters of all time, and he just showed at this Olympics, had high expectations, and he certainly lived up to them.
Yeah, it was awesome. And that's what, Tom, you said it. To me, the swimming was as good as ever, even without Michael Phelps. I was worried about what was going to happen when we have no Phelps, and it delivered. It delivered. Quite frankly, there was more close races, a little bit less world records than we're used to seeing, but more upsets and more just really, really tight finishes. Sometimes it's cool to see someone dominate, but other times it's also cool, to watch an event where you don't know who's going to win. And other times you know who's going to win, and guess what? They don't win. So the swimming in the Olympics has had absolutely everything.
I guess we'll move on to the gymnastics, guys. How about biggest stars? What have the stories been? Common, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest story has been Simone Biles dropping out to focus on her mental health in the all-around, the team all-around there. She did the first vault. It was not good. She had the twisties, the gymnastics term, where she kind of lost her place in the air, didn't know where she was. And certainly that is very dangerous. I do understand her dropping out to focus on her health, and she has every right to do it. And it actually, as much courage as it takes to compete, it also takes a lot of courage to not compete. And she certainly showed that by giving her teammates a chance. And you know what? They delivered. They got a silver medal without her. Just an absolutely great showing for the USA ladies. I know it's the first time in about 10 years they haven't won, but it was really neat for them. And Biles, I don't know, I'm guessing you might have heard, maybe you didn't, the primetime coverage tonight, but Biles did come back in the balance beam, getting a bronze medal. And that was the story for me for the American ladies. Going into the Olympics, it was all about Biles, all about Biles. And, you know, that's part of what contributed to her dropping out, all the pressure externally and internally, but it was a team effort for the Americans. Suni Lee getting the individual gold in the all-around. We had Jade Carey get a gold in the floor exercise. We had Michaela Skinner get a silver on vault. And then Biles gets the bronze on beam. Lee also had a bronze on the bars. So total team effort for the American ladies, and a very impressive showing. It shows you that as good as Biles is, this team is about more than Simone Biles, as are all sports. One person doesn't carry a team in anything. Just a couple other performances outside of the American team. The Russian Olympic Committee did incredible, winning the team individual all around in both the men's and women's. And some of their athletes struggled with a lot of physical issues. Arthur Dalaloyan had surgery on his Achilles tendon and came back 3 months after surgery. Normally, you wait a whole year until you come back after that, and he helped them win the gold. And also, Nikita Nagorny had been dealing with kidney stones during the Olympics. He won several golds, both in the team competition and individually, medals rather, the gold coming in the team event. So a really impressive showing for the USA ladies and Russian Olympic Committee in general.
Yeah, I find it interesting how the Russian Olympic Committee athlete is the one who recovers on a ridiculously fast turnaround time after Russia as a country is not allowed to participate in the Olympics due to a doping scandal that involved a whole host of their athletes. So certainly good perseverance on his end. As far as the main storylines, like you said, it's Simone Biles. I was personally disappointed not being able to see her compete in this Olympics because I thought she was about to take her game to an entirely new level. It was interesting, like as the story kind of came out, finding out I wasn't sure if it was a mental pressure thing of like, is she just not feeling into it or something like that? But the more that I'm learning about twisties, and this is the first time that I'm hearing it, the way I'm kind of likening it is like if Michael Phelps all of a sudden couldn't get in sync for when to breathe on his stroke, and that throws him off. Obviously, it's very, very different sports. And as disappointed as I was to see that Simone Biles wasn't going to be competing, I 1000% understood it because when you're in the air, you don't have a visual with your landing spot. Gymnastics is one of the few sports where, like, when you're doing a jump or you're performing, you don't actually know where you're going to end up all the time. So good on her to recognize that her calibration was a bit off. The only thing that would have been worse is if she tried to have gutted through with this old, a prototypical or archetypical image of the overcoming athlete. I'm glad that she didn't try to go for it because of the huge potential that has for serious injury to herself. So good to see that she came back and competed in the less event, get a bronze medal for that. And of course, Suni Lee was huge. I think on the flip side, still a little bit disappointed in the men's gymnastics team. I'm not sure why they're not able to compete at a higher level. I believe they finished 5th as a team all around.
Same as last Olympics.
They certainly have some decent individual talent. I'm curious what it's going to take to get them back up to par. I know it's usually been women's gymnastics is the more dominant of the two programs. I wonder what it's going to take for men's gymnastics to get up to that level of, men's and women's swimming. Can they get synonymous, Can they get synonymous with the athletes in the pool as they can on the mat?
Yeah, real quickly, 2 points. One on Simone Biles, but I'll hit on the first one you just talked about. I think part of it is that America has so many sports that it's good at. And obviously, a lot of people want to go out for basketball, football. Obviously, football doesn't have females that go out for it. So I think part of the problem with the men's gymnastics is you often don't have some of the top athletes growing up wanting to do gymnastics. I think gymnastics as a whole is much more popular sport among girls than boys is. So I think USA simply has a harder time getting that talent pool compared to the ladies' side. But as far as the Simone Biles situation, yeah, this is interesting. I want to make 2 points about that. First off, she did do the first vault in the team competition, and she had the lowest score of any of her teammates. So a lot of people say, well, she doesn't want to give it all. She doesn't want to help her team. But arguably, with having the twisties and not being able to perform, she probably would have hurt her team had she competed in the team all around in the final 3 events. Secondly, yeah, it's different. It's different than someone like having an injury and playing a skill sport. I know you can always get injured, but you're not performing flips in the air when you play soccer, basketball, or swimming or running. It's a different sort of skill. So gymnastics is much different, where you can literally have a life-threatening injury if you do compete. So part of that is just not only a mental health thing, it's also a physical health thing, because you could put yourself in danger. Drew, anything else you want to add on the gymnastics before we talk about other things?
I was just gonna say it's almost like somebody, doing a very dangerous routine at like the circus, an acrobatic routine. If you're off a little bit, it could result in a very, very serious injury. But yeah, what other stories you got, Common?
Yeah, a few other really neat things. I'll hit on these very fast because hit on some of these last week. The Abe brother and sister winning gold in judo for Japan. Oksana Chusovitina, the 46-year-old gymnast, the oldest female competing on vault for Uzbekistan. And then the more recent one since last week's show, a big storyline is what was going to happen in the 100-meter final with Usain Bolt, one of the most wide open fields in the history of the event. And for the first time, we had an Italian winning the 100 meters, Lamont Jacobs, a big guy. What's crazy is you don't often see a big guy like him winning an event like that. I mean, Usain Bolt is tall, but he's skinny. Jacobs looks like an NFL linebacker. That's how he's built almost. So really impressive for him. I thought it was really neat what we saw in the high jump, the Italian and the Qatar athlete Barshim for Qatar and Timberi for Italy, who apparently are really close friends. They shared the gold medal there, and we haven't seen that in over 100 years. I think 1912 was the last time we had a shared gold medal. So that was a fun story to see. And something else I have written down, countries with first medals in the Olympics and first gold medals. Bermuda picking up its first gold in the triathlon with Flora Duffy. And San Marino went into these Olympics, a country with just under 34,000 people in the entire country. Like that's like the Mizzou campus when we went to college. If you count the grad students and the teachers, that country had never won a medal. They've now got 2 medals in these Olympics. So Tokyo 2020 or 2021, I guess we got to refer to it as 2020, has been quite the year for just a lot of upsets, a lot of new time winners in events and countries and sports. Even in the American team, the vast majority of their swimmers are actually new swimmers who have just now come on the scene. Lydia Jacoby, the perfect example of that, the 17-year-old from Alaska who I talked about earlier, getting the upset in the 100-meter breaststroke. She beat Lily King, who hadn't lost that race in over 5 years. Katie Ledecky came in 4 for 4 on golds in individual races. She lost not once, but twice. She ended up getting, 2 silvers and 2 golds in these Olympics, but she wasn't invincible as she normally is. And the craziest upset to me was Novak Djokovic in tennis. This man won Wimbledon, Australian Open, French Open. He lost in the semis. He lost in the bronze medal game. Didn't even get a medal for Djokovic. What about the USA women's soccer team? These ladies hadn't lost since 2019, 44 games in a row without a loss. Of course, some ties mixed in there, but the U.S. ladies losing in the group stage, then they lost in the semifinal. They're playing for a bronze medal now. And of course, Lily King, I mentioned, getting upset. We talked about Simone Biles, who we thought was going to win everything and Biles didn't end up with a single gold medal in these Olympics. So just a crazy year, crazy upsets, and just a lot of things that have happened that weren't expected in these Olympics.
Yeah, and a couple other things that I kind of found to be, I don't know if they're necessarily intriguing storylines, but just like cool athletic feats. In the women's 1500-meter race, Sifan Hassan who is a Dutch runner. I don't know if it's what country they go by, Dutch, if it's Holland, whatever it is.
Or Netherlands.
Netherlands, yeah.
I think they go with Netherlands in the Olympics.
Okay, so I'll say Netherlands. Well, it says Dutch distance runner. So Dutch distance runner Sifan Hassan fell in the last lap, or coming into the last lap in the 1500-meter race. Everybody else was ahead of her, and she just comes around and finishes the rest of the race, ends up winning the heat, and goes on to win gold. I thought that was a pretty cool athletic feat. And then this is going back a couple of weeks, but Anna Kiesenhofer out of Austria, who won women's cycling, was so far ahead of everybody else that the person who came in second, the person who won silver, thought that they actually won gold. It was the sort of thing that they actually found out after the race, that that Kiesenhofer kind of like snuck out ahead of the pack as the Dutch cyclists were doing the thing where they were trying to control the race. Snuck out ahead. Nobody saw her, and because they didn't have radio, nobody knew that. So it led to this incredible discussion I was having with Jenna about, as an athlete, how would you feel thinking that you were like kind of coasting to a gold victory, or like you had that in your mindset, as opposed to maybe going at your fullest, not knowing that there was somebody ahead of you? Like, how much are you kicking yourself? So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of like a fun, like almost like debate that you could get into in terms of like, should she feel good about winning silver? Does she have maybe some regret that she could have possibly caught up if she'd only known there was somebody to catch up to?
Hey, can I tell you a story about 8th grade cross country common that I just thought of what you were talking about?
Sure, go for it.
All right. So in 8th grade cross country, have either of you ever ran cross country?
I don't know if I've run anything in my life.
No.
No. Okay. Well, you may or may not know this. Some of those courses, they're like areas where you can get lost potentially and sort of like skip laps or do extra laps. Well, this kid who's like not good beat me in the race, and I found out it's because he like skipped a lap, and I was like shocked how he beat me. And this, of course, was early on in the season. And then when the cross country conference meet came to be, they tally up all your average finishes, and they put you in if you're in the top 10. So I was 11th, but had they counted that meet early in the season, I would have been 10th, would have been in the conference meet. And this kid skipping a lap basically cost me my cross country conference meet participation, which I would have definitely finished among the last, but still it was an honor that I didn't get to miss. I had to be the alternate instead.
That's really unfortunate. Like, how is there no justice for you in this?
There is no justice. That's life sometimes.
Wow. No justice. Goodness. Wow.
Anything stuck out to you, Drew, before we'll get into just some things you're looking forward to in this week too, but did anything stick out to you that we haven't hit on?
I mean, I just can't even figure out how to watch the Olympics. I mean, the prime time, I already know what happens. So it's tough to watch. It's been tough to watch the Olympics. There's no easy guide, and, I'm not hip, so I don't have Peacock. So
I have it.
Tough to watch it.
Yeah, and I think I've read some articles that are saying that did NBC like on purpose make it difficult for people to find some of these events so that they can watch them on prime time? Because there's a lot of stuff. I do this thing where I speak into my remote and I say Olympics, and it shows me everything that's on the Olympics. And a lot of stuff is on the apps online, NBC Sports app, Peacock, as you mentioned. So then you can search it by sport and find your event. So I've got it down to a T now. I've kind of mastered it. But certainly if you're not working hard enough or looking hard enough for it, it's hard. And for me, it's like some days I've been able to like avoid what happens in prime time. Other days I haven't been. But I mean, I don't know. I do think they probably could be doing it a little bit better. In general, I think part of it is COVID. I feel like we haven't had as many like storylines of Japan. I think on Sunday night they put Mike Tirico in the Market Square, and I was like, finally we actually get to see some of Japan. But I know a lot of that is because of COVID, so not necessarily blaming the NBC crew there. But as far as things that I'm looking forward to, is track and field, and real quickly, an incredible race last night in the 400-meter hurdles. Norway's Karsten Warholm setting the new world record by nearly a second. Just he was even shocked at his time. The American Benjamin getting second place there. I can't wait to see how Allison Felix does in track and field. Now 35. She's trying to be the most crowned female Olympian for America. She of course just had a child last year, so it'll be interesting to see how Allison performs. Noah Lyles in the 200, that's coming up. I want to see how he does. And here's a personal one for you, and more on this in Locks of the Week, by the way. What about Bulgaria's rhythmic gymnastics team? People may or may not know I was born in Bulgaria. I moved to the USA when I was 8, winning the green card visa lottery. So I certainly am looking to support the Bulgarian athletes whenever I get a chance. Kostadinova winning the silver in shooting for Bulgaria. So the rhythmic gymnastics team is sort of in a mix. They're the sort of small favorite for a silver medal. They're anywhere from that 2-4 range, where Bulgaria, Israel, and Japan all have a shot at the silver and bronze. And my cousin in Bulgaria, who we Skype with every week, is super into rhythmic gymnastics. We had a whole long talk about it in Bulgarian on Sunday, and she kind of gave me a preview of things to look out for. And the rhythmic gymnastics, by the way, is really cool. It's where they do the twirls, they throw the balls, and they do the ribbon and all these other like really fun events. And because America isn't good at it, because America doesn't medal in it, we don't really see it very much in the Olympics. That'll be one of those things where me and my mom are going to play the game of where can we find this and watch this. But personally, I'm looking forward to that. And then, of course, we'll get to this in a little bit, but men's basketball. Is USA going to win the gold medal? They've looked much better the last few games. And could it be Slovenia, America in the final? What I predicted, what I've been wanting to see, both in the semis. And then, of course, I'm looking to see who wins the gold medal race, USA or China. USA ahead of China for total medals. I think it's safe to say America will hold off the Chinese because of their dominance in the track and field, but they're 8 medals behind in the gold medal chase. Can they make up that 8 medal chase? I know we have sports like men's and women's basketball that in theory could get them 2 gold medals there, but they have a long way to go to catch the Chinese. And we've seen a lot of silvers for America in these Olympics, a lot of silvers where maybe their top people were projected to get golds. So can they deliver the golds? Can America catch China? I'll be keeping my eyes on that.
Yeah, I'm mostly looking forward to the various dashing that is going to be going on over the rest of the Olympics. And like I said, Carmen, how does Team USA do? Are they able to, continue to ascend towards top competition and ultimately bring home gold for USA?
Yeah, and Carmen, with the USA women's soccer team losing to Canada the other day, what went wrong there?
Yeah, I think the USA ladies were one of the heavy favorites, one of the teams that was supposed to bring home gold for America. But it shows you how hard it is to always win. USA has the best team in the history of soccer on the female side, having won the most World Cups, having won the most gold medals, but they haven't repeated World Cup gold medal. So it seems like one year they win the World Cup, then they don't win the Olympic gold. The next year they win the Olympic gold, they don't win the World Cup. It's very hard to always win. What went wrong is they simply didn't put the ball in the net. They had 0 goals against Sweden in the group stage loss, also a 0-0 tie against Australia, and then the 1-0 loss against Canada, albeit a very controversial loss. I think Canada got a penalty they didn't deserve. But you know what? You have the whole 90 minutes, and the fact that America couldn't score a goal is their own fault. It's not for a lack of opportunities. They had 17 shots and 6 on goal. But finishing is part of the game. And to me, crazy if you look at this team with players like Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd, Megan Rapinoe, Kristen Press, and Rose Lavelle, so many others who are really good goal scorers and have been for many years. Kind of crazy to see them not score the ball. But that's how it works. It's the year of the upsets. That's what we've seen. And we continue to see it in these Olympics, and they just didn't have it. It's any given day, anything could happen, and that's what we've seen these Olympics.
Yeah, it was tough for the women's soccer. And Tom, do you have something there?
No.
No.
You didn't
All
watch
right.
that game. You didn't stay up at 3 a.m. to watch the game.
I certainly did not.
I caught some of it actually. Yeah.
That's tough. Well, then we'll move on to the men's hoops in the semis, guys. We didn't think they'd make it this far. Well, I did. I don't know if you guys did, but
Of course we did.
okay, good. Well, you think they'll win the gold?
I think so. Well, here's the thing. First off, what is Olympic men's basketball? I think women's basketball is doing the same thing. What in the world are they doing? They're doing like draws after the group stage. They're not doing it based off finishes. Here you had USA and Spain, arguably the top 2 teams in the world, certainly according to the world rankings. And we have to see them in a quarterfinal game. I feel gutted for Spain because that team deserves to get a medal for sure. They finished second to the U.S. In 08 and 2012. And in 2016, they were third because they played USA in the semis. So no justice there. But as far as the USA team, we were really down on them last week, but we were still thinking like they might pull out the medal. I'm feeling a little bit better about it now. The last game was, I've watched 2 games full, and ironically, they were arguably their 2 best performances against Iran, where they won by like 50 something. Drew getting the cover there on Locks of the Week. And then I watched this game against an actual good team. One thing that I've noticed has improved with America from having watched one of the Olympic Tour games and seen bits and pieces and highlights of the rest and reading about it is their ball movement. They had fantastic ball movement against Spain. It seems like they've really got their teamwork down, and that shows because these superstars, like we've talked about, USA doesn't send the same team every year. A lot of these guys have never played together, so these new guys are getting used to each other. That was key for me. Also, they have a lot of good shooters, and they struggled a lot early in the Olympics, in the pre-Olympic tour, to shoot the ball. Now, all of a sudden, they're shooting the ball really well. So that speaks well for them. One area that I would like to see them improve on is defense, though. I know these Olympic players are better in the Olympics than they are in the NBA, but Ricky Rubio scoring 38 points against USA is not a good look for them. I mean, he looks like Larry Bird out there the way he was playing. So I think their defense, locking down on superstars, must improve. Certainly Luka Doncic. They might face him in the Olympic final, or Evan Fournier, who shouldn't be a star, but we saw how he lit them up last time. So we'll see if they can play defense. To me, though, is like, if the threes aren't going in, do they have a plan B? Because for me, it was a little scary watching the halftime report. They interviewed the assistant coach, and he said, coach, like, what do we got to do? Well, we got to keep shooting our open threes and knock them down. And it's like, thankfully, they did knock them down in the second half against Spain. But had they kept not falling, is that what they would have kept doing? Would they have kept jacking threes? Because to me, it sounded like that was the game plan. Keep shooting the threes. They'll eventually go in. And there may be a day where that doesn't happen. So that's my other question mark for them. But I think they've got the best team. I will still pick them to win, but they're not invincible. Tied at halftime against Spain. Certainly any one of these teams left could beat them. We already saw Australia beat them in the pre-Olympic tour. So they've got a hard way ahead.
Yeah, it's almost as if, the common, a lot of those reasons that you elicited for why the team's coming together, it's almost as if all the Chicken Littles for the past couple of weeks have been basically just spinning their wheels about how USA Olympic basketball is doomed and everything. And yeah, it didn't look good, but all the things that people dismiss as excuses, they're NBA stars, they should be winning anyway. These are actually key factors that have led to this team actually playing more cohesively as a unit. No single NBA star can certainly go up against a 5-man pack line defense or something along those lines. They do have to work together in order for this team to achieve its ultimate goal, which is winning gold medal. I mean, I don't care as much about Olympic basketball as I do just regular NBA basketball. So I wasn't terribly concerned, in part because I didn't particularly have a huge vested interest in this. But yeah, I fully expect them to continue to go out and win, if not gold, then silver. They'll be in the championship game, the gold, the podium medal game, whatever it's called. Whatever.
Medal stand.
the medal stand game, whatever it is. Like they'll be in that. They'll be competing at a high level because they are starting to get their bodies used to playing in Tokyo time, playing together as a team of stars as opposed to disparate individual talents. They're actually coming together more cohesively as a team. So I wasn't super worried before. I'm not worried at all now. I'm pretty sure USA is going to be just fine in basketball.
Oh yeah, I mean they'll be just fine. They'll win the gold medal. So we'll look forward to that as we'll transition over to the association guys trade deadline or the free
baseball.
agency. Yeah, free agency started yesterday, and Common's favorite player, Russell Westbrook, headed to the Lakers to team up with LeBron. Common, what do you think? I know they're going to be a heavy favorite and they'll probably win next year, but what do you think of Mr. Westbrook?
Yeah, this is the ultimate destination in question for me, and mixed emotions just because you guys know how I think Russell Westbrook is the most overrated, not only most overrated basketball player, but most overrated athlete in the history of sports. In any sport, in any era, we've never seen someone as overrated as Russell Westbrook is, because he is so inefficient. He puts up these stats, but he leads the NBA in turnovers. He always has among the worst field goal percentages. And you look at all these teams he leaves the Rockets. They do worse than they did with Chris Paul. Then he leaves the Thunder, and the Thunder do much better with Chris Paul than they did with just Westbrook. This is a guy that is all about the stats, but the efficiency, the wins, the championships simply haven't been there for him. What worries me about this is that you have two ball dominant players in LeBron and Westbrook. And Westbrook is going to take shots away from LeBron, take shots away from Anthony Davis, two of the most efficient players in the NBA. And you have Westbrook, one of the most inefficient players. So that worries me a little bit. Also, not to mention that the Lakers, really their one weakness is three-point shooting. They need to get three-point shooters around LeBron James. And I know they've sort of done that. I know that they got Malik Monk. Kendrick Nunn isn't a three-point shooter. Carmelo can knock down threes. They got him also in the offseason. They're very busy. But to me, Westbrook isn't a three-point shooter. And he doesn't really space the floor. I almost feel like he'll get in the way. And we saw that Westbrook and Harden didn't really work that well together in Houston. I know we had a similar case with LeBron and Wade, but that was a little bit different because LeBron and Wade are a little bit more unselfish than Westbrook, and they're literally best friends. LeBron and Wade were best friends, and they knew what they were getting into. And also, I think Wade was better than Westbrook is, and I think LeBron back in Miami is better than he is now with the Lakers. So a little bit different eras. I think the Lakers are up there for favorites just because they already had an incredible roster. Health was their issue last season, and they already added a lot more other guys. But I actually label the Nets as a slight favorite over the Lakers just because we've seen James Harden is willing to pass the ball. James Harden is willing to be the number 2 or 3 guy, clearly behind Durant and probably behind Kyrie in scoring at least. I don't know if Westbrook is willing to be the clear number 3. I think if he tries to score 17 to 18 points per game and he lets LeBron and Davis get their 25, the Lakers are champions. But if Westbrook is averaging over 20 points, the Lakers are in huge trouble when it comes to winning the ring, because for them, it's ring or bust.
Russell Westbrook is like at least a top 25 point guard all time. Like he's not, how can you say he's
point
overrated?
Guard, maybe point guard. I don't know. In the history of the NBA, there hasn't been that many point guards until the recent era.
Like maybe
I think
top
that
15.
I think he's overrated in the sense that he's won an MVP and he didn't deserve it. I think he's overrated that he's made all pro first team or second team many years when he didn't deserve it. I think he's overrated because we see the teams he leaves, like they do better without him. Like, Chris Paul, clearly he's been on similar teams with Westbrook, and Chris Paul led teams have done much better than Russell Westbrook led teams. So yeah, I mean, I think he's overrated. Absolutely. I mean, you can put up statistics when you're always going for those uncontested rebounds, when you always have the ball in your hands. You put up stats. I'll tell you this, though, it'll be fun to see. Westbrook all of a sudden isn't going to be getting those free rebounds because Davis and LeBron aren't going to give them to him. So look for his rebound total to be more like 6 to 7 rebounds as opposed to 11, where guys are clearing the lane for him. No triple doubles now either with LeBron James. I saw a funny thing on Twitter that said LeBron and Westbrook both 1 assist from a triple double. They're just passing the ball back and forth. So that'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, I think that the thing that the Lakers are kind of going for on this is that they saw what kind of happened to themselves and also the Brooklyn Nets in this past postseason, which is they're building around the superstar model. So you're not really going to have a ton of depth. Occasionally, though, you're going to have injuries. Both Davis and LeBron had some injury issues, and when Davis was out, LeBron had to carry the load all by himself. We saw this happen in Brooklyn, too, with Kyrie going down, Harden going down, Durant going down at different times. So really what the Lakers are doing, not necessarily trying to find like the best fit for LeBron and AD from a perspective of they're all healthy on the floor at the same time, but more so that without one of the big three or without one of the big two between Davis and LeBron, LA didn't really have anybody who was capable of stepping up and being their own playmaker. Russell Westbrook, for all of his flaws, is a major big-time playmaker. So basically what the Lakers have done is they say at any point in time, we can have 2, maybe 3 legitimate triple-double threats because Davis is no slouch in passing the ball. I know his assist numbers aren't going to be great because that's not what he's on the floor to do. But if he wanted to do kind of like the passing version of Russell Westbrook on rebounds, he could absolutely do that. He has the talent for that. So basically, they're just saying we need one more superstar who's been remarkably durable, minus a major couple of knee injuries. Westbrook has come back and continued to be a high-level performer after injury. So I think that's what the Lakers are going for on this. I think it makes them, one of the top contenders out in the NBA certainly, but definitely out in the West. Along with, you have to factor Phoenix repeating. Maybe Golden State getting healthy can be up there as some of the other favorites as well. But this definitely positions the Lakers to be a little bit different model, but definitely one of the favorites out West.
Drew, are the Lakers your favorite? Do you like the Westbrook move?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Love the Westbrook move. You signed Melo as well, Malik Monk, as you mentioned. So, yeah, they're going to be the favorite, of course.
The favorite in the NBA, not just the West.
Oh, of course. I mean, Bucks already won, so they're good.
What about the Nets? Are they good?
I would have Nets above Lakers, I think.
James Harden hasn't won a ring yet. What about the Nets?
I guess I don't like James Harden as much as Giannis. So, but no, I think an NBA Finals with the Nets and Lakers would be classic.
That's what we thought we'd see this last season. I think we could see it again. I also wonder, is Westbrook the backup option just because just kind of transitioning into other offseason moves we've seen? I think some Chris Paul originally opted out of his deal, and then he signed a new deal for 4 years with Phoenix. Did the Lakers maybe want to get Chris Paul? Because we've talked about that banana boat trip that LeBron James had, and he had, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade, and Carmelo Anthony. Well, he's played with Dwayne Wade. Now Carmelo Anthony joins the Lakers. Would they have rather had Chris Paul on that team? Because I think if with Chris Paul, they definitely would have been the favorite to win the championship. With Russell Westbrook, I'm not sure. But I think that's something to think about. I think it's interesting that Chris Paul did sign with the Suns because I think he wants a championship ring. And I think the Lakers would have been not a free championship, but almost sort of like a closer to championship guarantee for him. Interesting to see Stephen Curry, also 4-year deal with the Warriors. I think it's $215 million over 4 years now, the richest contract in the history of the NBA. How about that for Steph Curry? So he's not joining a super team. We saw Giannis sign on with the Bucks, and I think Kawhi Leonard opted out, but they're expecting him to stay with the Clippers. So some interesting moves in the offseason, but I think the Lakers have gotten a little bit better, but not much else has changed. I'll say this, though, for sure. I love what the Bulls are doing, our Chicago Bulls with Tom Castleman. I don't know if you just saw here within the last couple hours, a Woj bomb. They're getting DeMar DeRozan. They already got Lonzo Ball. They've got Alex Caruso. They drafted, we'll talk about the draft in the next segment, but they drafted Ayo Dosunmu in the second round. Talk about a steal. So I love what Chicago is doing all of a sudden. We might have some playoff basketball in Chicago one thing to say about Kawhi Leonard. Did you hear the story that Westbrook and Leonard were originally going to team up? Westbrook was interested. Instead, Leonard called Paul George and said, Paul, I'd rather team up with you than Russell Westbrook. That should tell you something about Russell Westbrook, by the way.
I just like how these all NBA teams are decided by people who are paid to watch basketball for a living. I'm going to trust their eyes over anything I can see. As far as Chris Paul and the Lakers goes, looks like his deal was for about 120 million. I think the issue with him going to the Lakers is like, if wishes were fishes, the world would be an ocean. The Lakers just had no feasible way of getting Chris Paul onto their roster. So finding a way to trade for Russell Westbrook, I guess, was the next best option. I don't think Phoenix was really going to be willing to play, sign and trade ball with the divisional rival and say, oh yeah, we'll take back, THT, Alex Caruso, give us Kyle Kuzma. Like, they don't want that. They were on the verge of a title. So they're going to bring back Chris Paul and run it back again. As far as other NBA moves, Bulls certainly making a lot of moves. I guess it's going to be fun to have the Bulls in the playoffs again, but I don't see this making them a title contender anytime soon. So this is, I guess, okay. It's fine. It's going to be up to AK Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, the team president and general manager, to find talent in the second round, because there's only so many draft picks that they can trade away. And if they're going to be going for this almost like purgatory level where they're going to be sitting maybe like bottom 4 of the playoffs every single year, you're not really going to be getting great talent, and you're not really going to be competing for an NBA title from that spot. So you got to be able to hit on those late first round picks and second round picks. We'll see what happens with Ayo Dosunmu. That's definitely an interesting one. Drew, what kind of NBA moves have stood out to you and some of your favorite teams?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Melo move sticks out, but I think the Heat are going to be one of the best teams in the East next year. Jared Butler, Kyle Lowry, and Bam Adebayo. Looking forward to watching them for sure.
Yeah, I think that was another move that we didn't notice. I'll tell you this time, though, I'd argue with you that the Bulls are much better off being a 5-6 seed in the East than they are being like a 10 seed in the East, because they're actually stuck in a worse situation now where they're like near the bottom of the East, but not all the way at the bottom. So they're not necessarily getting, a top 5 or 6 pick. So I'd rather see them in that area where they're in the playoffs, but towards the bottom, as opposed to not being in the playoffs, but also not being at the very bottom of the league. Because I think with the emergence of Zach LaVine, who is becoming, granted, probably a second tier, but is an NBA star. I think with him on the team, and they're not going to be a team that's going to be at the very bottom of the league when you have a player like that. So I like seeing them improve. And I think also keep this in mind, Zach LaVine is with Team USA. We've seen guys come back from playing on the American team. Granted, this team doesn't have all the best players that it's had in the past, but that improves you as a player. And Zach LaVine has been all about improvement throughout his career. He came in as mostly a dunker. Well, now he's improved his three-point game. We've seen him at the end of games. He's improved his ISO game. So Zach LaVine has nowhere to go but up. You get him some superstars, not necessarily superstars, but really good players where he's not the only man on the team, and he's going to do pretty well. So I'm looking forward to it. So many things happening in the free agency, and so many more things to happen that I had to put Adrian Wojnarowski on my phone. So I got his tweets directly sent to my phone, so I track what's going on, because it's exciting. I'm not big into free agency normally. I prefer the games, but there's just something crazy going on. Something's in the water with all this craziness this year.
Off seasons are great because you can always hope. You don't have to necessarily look at the results until it's December, January. So at this point in time, teams that are making moves that are really going for it, Miami, like you mentioned, Drew, definitely a big one. Chicago going for it. Definitely exciting for fans of those teams.
Absolutely, and some possibly more even exciting news, guys. NBA draft. Comment, who'd you like?
Yeah, I think Cade Cunningham to me is the best player in this draft. And I think Cade Cunningham almost stopped getting love after that first round loss in the NCAA tournament. But don't forget this, Kevin Durant lost in the first round, and he was just fine in his NBA career. And actually, Cade Cunningham sort of like almost single-handedly beat Baylor, the team that won the championship in the Big 12 title game. So he's delivered plenty. And I really like Cade Cunningham. I think this is a guy who has potential to be an all-star and possibly a Hall of Famer, just because I think he's got a really good NBA body. He's got the ISO game. He can pass, shoot, and dribble. He gets a lot of rebounds because of his size. He's really a guy that is very, very good. I think he can improve a little bit on the defensive end, but I think he's going to, because in the NBA he has to. And I think the one thing that could keep him from being, a truly great player is the turnovers. I think he's got to get that under control a little bit. But I think, to me, he's the best player in this draft. I know we got caught up with Jalen Brunson during the NCAA tournament, and his draft stock went up. But he also didn't get drafted maybe as high as people thought. So I think some of these NBA teams kind of realize that we shouldn't just look at the March Madness tournaments, look at these guys as a whole. And I think Cade Cunningham is a very, very solid first pick and the best player in this draft. I mean, do you guys think he's the best player in the draft, or is there someone else who you think might be competing with him?
Well, I think this kind of gets into a little bit of like the steal category, if you want to call it that. At pick number 5, the Orlando Magic grabbing Jalen Suggs. I think
Jalen Suggs, I meant to say. I think I said Brunson because I was thinking of the Villanova guy. Jalen Suggs is what I meant. My head is like,
No, you're completely good. No, I think that Jalen Suggs definitely has the potential to be the top player in this draft. I mean, Cade Cunningham has the size combination of the guard spot. Another player with a lot of upside, and this is going to be interesting to see how he kind of grows into his body, is Evan Mobley out of USC going to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Certainly not great news as a Bulls fan that they're going to be seeing him, 4 or 5 times this season. But yeah, it's always interesting, especially I think for the big men. Like, the guards are more ready to play now. The big men, it's interesting to see because, like, if you look at, say, DeAndre Ayton and what he kind of developed into over a couple of years, so we're going to see that similar kind of trajectory for Evan Mobley. So I like him to possibly be the best overall player in the draft, and I like Jalen Suggs to possibly be the best overall player out of this draft. I think, again, Suggs slipping to 5. I had him in the top 3, quite frankly, in terms of like my favorite players to go high and be like really good contributors right away. So we'll see it. I mean, all these players are out in the East, so it'll be great to watch them kind of grow up and develop over the next couple of years.
For the record, I think Mobley is the second best player in this draft, and I think he has sort of like, he kind of like reminds me a little bit of Giannis. I mean, obviously not going to be the same type of player, but kind of a tall, lanky guy that just knows how to score. He is pretty solid. He may not be like a traditional post player, but he sort of is, and I think he's going to get a lot of like those Giannis type buckets. I don't think it will be as good as Giannis, obviously, but I look for him to also be a very good player. The top of this draft is very strong for sure.
Maybe like a Kristaps Porzingis type of player.
Maybe
more.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Porzingis is actually oddly really athletic. I've almost forgotten about him because he hasn't played that well lately. I think he could be better than Porzingis, personally.
Yeah, I mean,
he could be Porzingis if Porzingis played up to his potential.
Yeah, I mean, Mobley's 7 foot 215. I mean, he's a big body, but he's also very athletic. So, yeah, I think Cunningham was the best player. Mobley's right there second, and yeah, great pick by the Magic with Jalen Suggs, no doubt.
What about steal of the draft? Do you guys have someone who's a steal? I mean, I guess you sort of hinted at Jalen Suggs. I was thinking more of steal in the second round, but just it could be someone in the first round. What are some like really, really smart value picks that you guys like in steals of the draft?
I mean, he's more of a high floor type of player, but Davion Mitchell out of Baylor going to the Sacramento Kings. I mean, how many first round players has Sacramento missed on that looked like solid, college players coming out, but either were unproven and they were like, as they were drafted right out of their freshman year, or if you look at like, say, Nick Stauskas, who had a good career at Michigan, but didn't have much projection beyond that. Davion Mitchell comes in as right now today, a good defensive on-ball defender. And those are hard to come by in the NBA. We have this term that we like to listen to where there's superstars, and then kind of those bench players are 3 and D. Well, at the very least, if you've got that D part of the 3 and D, you can learn how to shoot. Teaching somebody how to play defense, that's more instinctual, that's more effort. Davion Mitchell has shown that he has the ability to do that sort of thing. So I think for once, Sacramento actually might be doing a pretty decent job with their first round pick and clicking over. I lost my tabs. Clicking over to round 2. I mean, the one name that I do know is Ayo Dosunmu. I don't know if I can qualify him as a steal because he's a solid player. I didn't really like what I saw in terms of his jump shot and kind of like his form on that. Hopefully, that's something that the Bulls can work out. Maybe he's going to be playing out in Hoffman Estates for the Windy City Bulls this season, given how much depth they have on the roster. That might be better for him developmentally if, in terms of play 40 minutes a night, because that's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to crack this rotation very much down at the United Center. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of develops out. As far as other second round picks, so I don't know if there's a whole lot of names that I actually know and can confidently say are steals of the draft.
Yeah, I look at Herbert Jones from Alabama. He's the SEC Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year in the SEC. He picked by the Pelicans at 45, and it can go a long way, defense in the NBA, especially if you're really good at it. So look for his name this season. And then way down at pick number 53. Well, actually, Jones was 35th. My bad. But pick number 53, Charles Bassey from Western Kentucky. This guy was really good coming out of high school, and he just kind of played injured his entire college career. So he had a lot of high expectations. Unfortunately, was injured throughout college and with the Hilltoppers. So he can recover from those injuries. Look for big things from the center.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of Michael Porter Jr. I know he still got drafted. I think 14th Porter was, but he was the #1 recruit coming out of high school. Only played like a couple games with Mizzou, all injured, all banged up. And, the first season he didn't really play much, or I think he didn't play at all his first season. The second season didn't really play much. Then all of a sudden, Michael Porter Jr., if you look at the second half of last season, played like an all-star. I mean, this guy is like borderline all-star come next season, could potentially make it. Certainly if he steps up because he's playing the defensive end. But I completely disagree with Tom Castleman about Ayo Dosunmu. I think this guy is nowhere near the Windy City Bulls. I think this is a guy who's going to play a lot of minutes in Chicago. I think he's going to be a sixth man off the bench and probably in a few years, the third or fourth best player on this team. I think he's got like a Jimmy Butler. I think of a guy the Bulls got in the second round who ended up being a great player. I'm not saying he's going to be quite as good as Jimmy Butler, but you know what? He shoots the ball better than Jimmy Butler. I don't care about the form. He's a guy who shot nearly 50% from the floor last year, nearly 40% from the three-point line. He's a great dribbler. He plays good defense. 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists at Illinois. He's a guy who has no weakness. To me, he's going to be a starter for the Bulls, and he could be like a really solid #3 option for Chicago. I think he's that good. I really do. I think he's being very underappreciated by the NBA community. I'm not really sure why, because he's got a really high wingspan as well. And I think like the shooting stroke, I'm not too concerned about that. I mean, Sean Marion has a really bad shooting stroke like I did, and he did just fine in the NBA. If you can play, you can play. And I think Dosunmu is going to get himself plenty of minutes. And I think what I love about him is that you look at what he did at Illinois, freshman to sophomore year, he improved. Sophomore to junior year, he improved. You look at his three-point shooting, how much it's improved over his college career. It shows you that this is a guy who will work on his craft and he's going to improve. So I think he's going to improve only more. And I think he's going to be a regular for the Bulls this next season. And I know what you're saying makes sense if he's going to be getting DNPs and playing once in a while. But I think this is a guy who's going to be getting 15 to 20 minutes right off the bat for me, and probably more as the season goes on. I really like him personally.
Well, I do too, but I'm saying, like, as far as the positions he plays, let's just like stick 1 through 3. It starts, you got Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Kobe White, Alex Caruso, Patrick Williams. Like, that's already 6 guys right there.
Isn't Patrick Williams a small forward?
Yeah, Patrick Williams is going to be playing the 3 and the 4. So at the very best, Ayo Dosunmu is 5th. He's kind of splitting time between point guard and small forward in terms of Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan.
He can play some point too, though.
He can play a little bit, but again, you've got Lonzo and Kobe White there. You've
I'll
got
tell you.
Troy Brown for
I'll
depth.
tell you this. I like DeSumo better than Kobe White. I like him better than Alex Caruso. I like him better than Patrick Williams. I
Like
think he's
right
better than all.
now?
Yeah, I think so. He's much more ready to score. He's much more ready to help his teammates out.
Okay.
Patrick Williams is more of an athlete. He's not really a great basketball player. I think DeSumo right now is probably number 4 of those guys that you mentioned. And like I said, you're looking at a guy who will be like your 6th man. Maybe not like game 1, but by the end of the season, he'll be a 6th man, possibly a starter if there's injuries and things go his way. I think he's much more proven out of college than Kobe White was, and I think he's much more well-rounded than Kobe White. And I think he's might be even better than Lonzo Ball. He can shoot the ball better than Ball, who has improved in that margin. But I don't know. I really like DeSumo a lot. I like him a lot.
I mean, wasn't Kobe White like the top player at UNC that year and drafted very, very high?
Yeah, but UNC has been down for a while now.
Excuse me.
I like DeSumo getting there as a good rotational piece. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen this year. I'm going to go with Lonzo Ball, the former number 2 overall pick, over Ayo DeSumo, the 38th overall pick. Not saying he can't become good. I'm just saying I think it's going to take a little bit of time.
I've got under 0.5 games that he plays with the Windy City Bulls. I don't think he even sniffs. I don't think he comes even close to playing on the Windy City Bulls.
We'll see. To clarify, I'm not saying that he deserves to play there. He doesn't deserve to be on the Bulls. I'm just saying that from a developmental perspective, it might be more beneficial to have him playing more minutes in that role. That's all I was saying. I'm not disparaging his talent. I'm not insulting like your talent evaluation or anything like that. Just want to
no, and
no
that's fine.
Smoke between us.
My no smoke here. But my point is that what you're saying makes sense if we're talking about a guy who like doesn't play or plays in blowout games or maybe gets in for 7 to 8 minutes. But I think he's too good to be playing 7 to 8 minutes. Would you agree if he's playing 15 to 20 minutes every game? He plays every game, no matter what, plays every game, 15 to 20 minutes in the NBA, I think is more valuable than 40 with the Windy City Bulls. Your point is completely right if he's a guy who's getting DNPs or playing 5 minutes a game, but I just don't see him as that type of guy personally.
Training camp is going to bear that all out. Summer League is going to as well. I think they're doing Summer League, right? Vegas and Orlando, they are. So those two arenas will definitely bear that out in terms of how ready the front office and coaching staff think that he is, because Billy Donovan, the head coach, has a lot to say in the players that he's going to be running with. I get the sense that with the Bulls making the moves that they're doing, they're going for veteran rotation, and they're going to put development. They're going to utilize their Windy City team as more of a development ground. So I'm doing a little bit of crystal ball here as well. I think if he does crack the rotation, if he does earn 15 to 20 minutes, absolutely have him on the NBA roster. But I think that if it's kind of early on, he's not seeing the floor as much, they might just say, hey, go, shoot in a different gym out in the suburbs, get your confidence back, work on your game, and you'll be an asset to us further on down the road.
And he's a Chicago guy like Derrick Rose. Obviously, don't think he'll be as good as Derrick Rose, but he's another Chicago kid they drafted. So he certainly will have family and friends supporting him no matter where in the area he plays his basketball.
Love it. Well, we'll see how DeSumo does in the Summer League. But moving on to the MLB trade deadline, I don't know if Contract Castleman needs to chime in here, but who are the biggest winners, losers of the deadline, Common?
Oh, my goodness. What an absolutely crazy trade deadline. I think Tom said it at the top of the show. This was one of the craziest we ever seen. The biggest winner to me is hands down the Los Angeles Dodgers. And it's scary to me because it's one of those situations where the rich get richer. They got Max Scherzer, and now they have a rotation with 4 former Cy Young guys on that team, depending on what happens with Trevor Bauer, also David Price, and of course, Clayton Kershaw and Max Scherzer, who have probably been the 2 best pitchers in baseball the last 10 years. And a guy, then they got Urias and then Dustin May still injured. And Walker Buehler, who isn't a Cy Young winner, has been better than Scherzer, Kershaw, or all of these guys this season. Not to mention that they also got Trey Turner, an all-star shortstop out of the Nationals. And quite frankly, they gave up next to nothing for all of these guys. So hats off to the Dodgers. The other notable winners to me have to be the New York Yankees. They're getting Joey Gallo and Anthony Rizzo, two left-handed power hitters who can hit home runs on that short porch down the right field line. I mean, Gallo has been probably a top 5 player in baseball this season, and Rizzo, albeit underachieving a little bit, he's a great player. So I think the Yankees did really, really well. I think the Mets getting Javier Baez also helps them. Baez and Lindor up the middle. How's that for a defensive pairing? The Giants adding Chris Bryant is a nice move. They kind of need that extra bat to compete in the playoffs. And then I like what the White Sox did. We talked about how they have a lot of hitters coming back. We talked about their really good starting pitching. The bullpen was maybe one of the areas for concern. Well, they got Craig Kimbrell and Ryan Tepera, basically the Cubs' two best pitchers coming across town in Chicago. And I'll get into the Cubs here in a little bit when we talk about losers. But as you see, a lot of like my winners sort of involved the Cubs in some way. So things are not going to be good for the Cubs this year, that's for sure. But what stood out to you? I mean, I'm probably missing a few names because there were just so many trades that happened.
Yeah, there were a ton of deals that were going on. You look at the Toronto Blue Jays acquiring Jose Barrios, the Twins ace. I know like the Brewers made a couple of moves to try to shore up their chances, where I think the Brewers are looking like a team that didn't necessarily make a splash move, but certainly are looking like a team that's going to be dangerous in the playoffs given the top 3 of their rotation. I mean, the winners are pretty obvious. It's everybody who acquired major league talent to win today. We're at this era in baseball now where teams are no longer really departing with their top 2, 3, 4 prospects because they're close to the big league level. And what does that mean? Inexpensive talent for the next 6 to 7 years, depending on how you play it. So in order to grade these trades fairly, we're going to have to see in part how teams end up this year, but also the talent that they acquire further on down the road, how that's going to end up playing out. A very painful example of this for me as a Sox fan is back in 2016, I want to say it was, the White Sox were in a good spot atop the division. At the end of April, heading into May, they acquired James Shields from the San Diego Padres for a pitcher named Eric Johnson and a shortstop named Fernando Tatis Jr., who was just 17 years old at the time. Now, arguably the face of baseball. I know Shohei Ohtani has kind of overtaken him on that, but he's the face of MLB The Show 21. That's how good this guy is. That's how personable and just, forward facing he is as an athlete, as a branding asset to the MLB. So that's the sort of thing to keep an eye out on. You touched on the big names as we're going to be moving on to losers in a little bit. I agree with you on all of those. We'll see who kind of shakes out, and we'll see which general managers, which front offices were able to kind of pan for a little bit of gold fleck here at the trade deadline.
Yeah, Drew, anything that you like? I know you're wearing a Rockies shirt. I know you're not a big baseball guy these days, but I think the Rockies were one of those losers. I think they let go some pieces. Anything stand out to you?
I think you guys, hit it on the head with the winners. I'm just here for the Cubs rant here in the next minute.
Yeah, heading into the Cubs rant, I think the Cubs were hands
they
down
the loser, right?
Yeah, the Cubs are the losers for sure. No question about it. And I think I get it where they're at the point where, first off, I'm going to start on a whole rant before I get into the Cubs about free agency as a whole. I hate this whole thing where if you're a seller, you have to like sell your stars and get prospects. And it's just like, that's what's expected in baseball, especially. I don't get why some of these teams aren't selling and getting MLB ready talents, because I feel like you're not getting what, obviously a case like Tatis Jr. hits, but the vast majority of these prospects don't hit because we've seen it. I think Ken Griffey Jr. and Chipper Jones are the only number 1 overall picks that have made the Hall of Fame. Talent is very hit and miss in baseball, more so than any other sport. So I don't get why some of these sellers are necessarily trading for prospects. Can't they sell for, ready-made talent where you get close to the value? The reason the Cubs are the losers is that they traded away everyone they had, literally everyone. It's one thing to rebuild and trade someone. They're not going to be able to keep all these guys, but I think given the relationship Baez has with the city, Rizzo has with the city, I think chances are they could have kept one of those, if not both of them. It just didn't make any sense. And what they did is They got rid of their 3 best hitters. Then, which their lineup hasn't been very good this season. But the one thing that's kept them from being really bad is that they hit a lot of home runs. Well, essentially, they got rid of all their power. Their other strong point was the bullpen. Well, they basically got rid of arguably their 3 top relievers. Certainly, Kimbrough, number 1, Tepera, probably number 2, Andrew Chafin, maybe number 3, a lefty there. They got rid of them, and then their starting rotation is a complete mess. So they literally made their ball club so bad that they're literally one of the worst teams in baseball. So when you want to rebuild and be a winner, you have to rebuild around something. At least someone has to be there. They've got no one there. They're essentially rebuilding with what is basically a minor league level ball club. And they really messed this up really, really poorly. Makes me think if Theo Epstein had stuck around one more year, does this happen? Because, I mean, it's really, really a bad look for the Cubs. And I think fans have an absolute right to be upset. The only decent player they got was, I think, Nick Madrigal out of the White Sox. I think he's the only like MLB level player that they got. The rest of these guys, they might never play.
They also got Cody Hort, who has been on the White Sox roster as a bullpen arm for the past 2 seasons. So they got 2 MLB ready players on there. I mean,
what? I mean, how good is he though? He's not that good.
Not that good now. Get back to me in a couple of years. I'm going to be interested to see how he develops. I think he's got closer stuff. And I mean, like, the reason why the Cubs weren't able to get anybody like that's because nobody's willing to offer that. Unfortunately, with baseball the way it is now, you don't have to win to make money. And that's ultimately what this comes down to, is owners caring about the pocketbooks more than the relationship, the social contract, if you will, that they have with their fan base. Something that I'll be touching on a little bit later on in the show, perhaps a little bit of a professional tease there. I like to sprinkle that in every now and again. I absolutely think that, it's possible that the Cubs could very well try to go out and sign Javi Baez or Anthony Rizzo or Chris Bryant. I think that they just don't want to. The Ricketts family they just don't want to spend that money to sign these players who are in their prime, but potentially leaving their prime. It's a whole big issue with economics in baseball. It's a bad look when you have, who are the big winners of the trade deadline? It's basically the 6 teams that are leading the divisions and maybe like 2 or 3 wild card teams. And everybody else we call a loser, so to speak, simply because they're just trading off pieces because they're not actually contending. So that's a bit of a problem in baseball. Another loser that I have, Trevor Story, can't catch a break. I believe he was scratched from a game on like July 30th. After the deadline had passed, and there were some jokes running around Twitter that the Colorado Rockies management is so bad that they still thought that the deadline was July 31st this year as opposed to July 30th. They traded Nolan Arenado. They have their other stars, Trevor Story, weren't able to find a fit for trading him to a contending team. So as far as he goes, not being able to play meaningful baseball yet again, that's gotta stink.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brutal stuff. Yeah, baseball, it's crazy how, if you're in the cellar, you just kind of get rid of everybody. But that's the way it is.
Yeah, but I don't know if I've ever seen it this much. Such an unloading block that the Cubs had. I mean, this is truly unprecedented. And interestingly enough, you had in their first game with their new teams, Rizzo, Bryant, and Baez all hit home runs right away. So that just was like a little extra sting and poke to it. And I mean, this is part of like your fan base and your culture is sort of like at some point you got to respect your legends and respect your fan base because I mean these guys were a big part of your team that won the World Series for the first time in 108 years. And if you look around Wrigley Field, I mean all the jerseys are probably one of those 3 players, and it's just not a very good look. I don't like it, and I think. Part of sports is having an excited fan base. I think had they gotten rid of like 1 or 2 of them, that would have been fine. I don't know why they had to unload all the bullpen arms though. Like I don't know why they decided. Like I get why Craig Kimbrough's gone because he's really coveted and wants to be on a playoff team. But why they had to get rid of Tepera and Chafin? It was just like it seemed like it was sort of like overkill. They're like we're gonna get rid of everybody. I think Chris Bryant was the one that was the one to go. I think him with his agent and his stature was going to demand the most. I think he wasn't going to come back, but I think certainly one of those other guys could have come back. But I mean, it is what it is. That's how sports
Mhm.
work. You don't often see trades that are evenly matched. I just think some of these franchises need to find ways for us to see more things like that because you're not getting what you deserve in return for your talent.
Were the phone lines at Fan Media ringing for you to possibly play shortstop for the Cubs right after the deadline? I was
Yeah, I
wondering
don't.
about that, given how many people they traded away. Maybe got to wind up the old arm, come out of the bullpen in the eighth
I
inning. They're common.
I would say I would be a better fit at first or third. That's what I played. So Rizzo and Bryant leaving probably put me at first base to get some picks. I think Patrick Wisdom has been playing a lot at third base anyways. Bryant really hasn't been a first baseman. I'll tell you this, Chris Bryant looked really, really weird in a Giants uniform. I mean, all three of them look weird. To me, Baez in a Mets uniform looked the most natural. Rizzo probably in the middle, but Bryant in that Giants uniform just looked so weird. It was almost like Emmett Smith in a Cardinals uniform level, or Jordan in a Wizards uniform, something like that. I mean, it was just weird.
Oh, definitely. Well, speaking of something that wasn't very weird, that was exciting. The Gold Cup final, Common. We know you watched the USA B team beating Mexico in that Gold Cup. Give us the recap.
What a crazy tournament. It's the year of the upsets, as I like to say. The American team certainly had no business winning the game. Mexico completely dominated the game, but Matt Turner was a beast in goal as he has been all tournament long. And in soccer, if you don't finish off your chances, you don't win games. And Mexico certainly noticed that against the USA. This American B team was really good and really bad at the same time. In their 6 Gold Cup games, 5 of them they won 1-0. So and those goals were just like nothing exciting. They don't have any creative talent going forward on this B team, but man, they have some good defenders. And Matt Turner in goal is great. He played so good that he's now going to throw his name up for the #1 goalie in this tournament. And USA, all of a sudden, by the way, Miles Robinson getting the 117th minute goal for the USA. He plays for Atlanta United. Tata Martino, Mexico's coach, who used to coach Argentina, by the way, used to coach Atlanta United. So that was like his former club player, burning him, potentially leading to Martino getting fired if the rumors are true. So how's that for a moment? I thought USA played phenomenal defense in the game, phenomenal goalie play, and just quite frankly, some really poor finishing by their opponents led them to winning the Gold Cup. But they also beat Mexico with their A team in the CONCACAF Nations League final earlier in the summer. So now all of a sudden, back-to-back tournament wins for the USA national team. Dare I say that they're sort of like the top of the CONCACAF region now? And dare I say that this is a squad that could be in the World Cup quarterfinals, which would tie them for the farthest they've made it since we expanded to more teams, also making it in the 2 quarterfinals, maybe the semifinals if things drop well. What's great about the American A team and the American B team, they're filled with youth, young players who are playing very well. And for the A team, a lot of them are in Europe. For the B team, a lot of them have shown that they're ready to play if they need to come the World Cup. This is a solid team. And after the collapse that was not making the 2018 World Cup, all of a sudden things looking as good for USA Soccer since the Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley days, if not better. Very exciting for USA. Drew, by the way, said there was no way they're going to win the Gold Cup. I did pick Mexico to beat them in our pre-Gold Cup coverage, but America proven me wrong and proven Drew Brackett wrong as well.
How about that? Well, for locks of the week, last week I had the USA parlay. I'm sure we'll get to that in a second, unless Mr. Castleman has something on the Gold Cup. No, he didn't.
You may proceed.
What a surprise. Tom Castleman has nothing to add with soccer. Well, locks of the week, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that I have now hopped you for first place again after your tough week Mr. Castleman going 0-3. I think, Tom is like a streaky guy in good streaks and bad streaks. He was well under 500 for most of the season, well in the back in third place. I think he was like 18 games under 500, got himself back to the 500 mark, got himself to first place, and now all of a sudden it's back-to-back 0 for weeks. So the streak has gone the other way. You had the White Sox over the Royals. The Royals winning 4-3. Astros minus 1.5 over the Mariners. The Mariners winning 11-8. That was a kind of a crazy game because I think the Astros led it early on, and Seattle had a crazy comeback. And then he had Iran plus 41.5 versus the USA. Wrong, the USA winning by 54. So I'll tell you two of those locks. Drew had the opposite. He hit the Iran game, USA covering easily. And Drew had USA women 3-on-3 minus 5.5 over Japan. USA did lose that game 20-18. Did rebound to win the gold, though. So they played their best when Drew Brackett was not betting for them. Their worst, their only loss coming, of course, when Drew Brackett bets on them. He also had the USA women minus 30.5 over Nigeria. The Americans only winning by 9. So Drew was 1-2. I was also 1-2. I also missed the White Sox Royals game that Tom had. Had the Angels over the Rockies. I was correct. The Angels winning 6-2. And I had USA women's soccer minus 1.5 over Australia. Unfortunately, they tied 0-0. But I am in first place now again, despite a 1-2 week. It just feels weird. Back-to-back bad weeks for the show. I think we're going to get back on track as a show this week. I'm predicting probably 9-0 this week for the show as a crew.
Yes.
Probably 9-0.
Probably, unless you disagree with one of my picks and you're going the opposite way. But I picked more obscure sports than I normally do, so I think there's no way that you guys are gonna agree with me, even though you guys both pick obscure sports, especially Drew. I will tell you this: even though I hit that Angels game, the last few weeks my baseball picks have not done as well. So I'm gonna take a baseball break this week. Resume baseball after the Olympics. I've got an all-Olympic card today. I'll tease that for you. But first, we'll start with Drew Brackett.
Yeah, we're going deep in the well this week, guys. Men's water polo. We'll take Italy plus 0.5 over Serbia. That'll be Wednesday morning. And we'll go to women's water polo in the Olympics. Canada plus 2.5 against Australia. That's Thursday morning. And how about some NFL preseason? Weedham boys plus 1.5 over the Steel Curtain Thursday night.
You banking on Dak Prescott playing a lot in that game?
No, I'm just banking on Weedham boys.
Weedham boys. I love it. The preseason bets are out. NFL preseason. This, by the way, might be, well, I don't know what will happen in Statement of the Week, but this might be maybe the last show we don't talk about NFL. I know it's going to be kind of our lead talk for sure once we hit September. So a lot more NFL. I saw this online with the preseason starting this week. This will be we'll have football, whether NFL or college or both, pretty much for the rest of the year. So that's a really exciting time. Tom, what do you have for locks of the week?
All right, so for my locks of the week, I'm going with an all baseball card. So give me Jose Suarez and the Los Angeles Angels in the first 5 innings at minus 145 over Jordan Lyles and the Texas Rangers. Absolutely not a good starting pitcher. So give me the Angels in the first 5 innings on that one. Actually, no, I'll take them for the whole game. I'll go ahead and trust the bullpen, minus 128. A little bit better margin on that one. So Angels just win the game outright. Give me the Brewers to cover 1.5 runs on the Pirates at minus 115. I think that's pretty good. First versus worst in the division. And then another road game, first versus worst. Give me the San Francisco Giants covering 1.5 at the Diamondbacks at minus 125.
So that just to correct that, it's Brewers minus 1.5 and Giants minus 1.5, just to make sure.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And then Angels are on the money line.
Wonderful. I love it. I love it. So all those games are tonight, so we'll know how you fare at the end of the night. My things will only know one of them, or at least I will. You guys will be in bed by then. But I'll wait for that pick. The first pick I'll pick is the one that I think is the most likely to happen. I like Olympic women's soccer, Sweden minus 115 over Canada in the gold medal game at the Olympics. Just to clarify, the way those soccer money line bets are done, it's over 90 minutes. So should Sweden and Canada tie and go to extra time and penalty kicks, I would automatically lose. So I like Sweden in 90 minutes simply because Sweden has been by far the best team in these Olympics. They're 5-0. They're the only team that's undefeated in Olympic soccer. 4 of those 5 wins have come by double digits, 2 or more, including a 3-0 trashing of the Americans. Also, their only game that they won by 1, it was 1-0, a shutout, where the other team didn't even score a goal against them. Sweden is playing some incredible soccer right now. Canada, on the other hand, has been very, very fortunate. You look at what they've done. They had 1 win and 2 draws in group play, barely getting out of the group there. And then after the group, they won in penalty kicks over Brazil. And then they beat USA 1-0 on a controversial penalty call that they didn't deserve, a game that they got outplayed in. So Sweden is also higher in the FIFA rankings. So more expectations going into the tournament. Much better play in the tournament. Sweden has been miles ahead of Canada in this tournament. So look for Sweden to win over 90 minutes. Sticking with women's sports in the Olympics, we're going to go to basketball. And I will take Australia plus 15.5 against the American ladies. Australia beat this USA team 70-67 in the pre-Olympic tour. I know we can't read too much into that, but are they going to flip by, 19, 20 points? I don't think so. I think you look at this American team, they simply haven't been as convincing as years past. They haven't been blowing teams out by as much. They beat France by 11, Nigeria by 9, and Japan just by 17. So only 1 game they've covered over 16 points against, really, quite frankly, a really poor Japanese team. I think the Australians cover that 15.5 spread. I do think America wins the game, but man, anytime I see like a spread of like 15, the first thought that comes to mind, it's like, how many upsets have we seen this year? Like if the spread were 30 or 40, obviously we wouldn't see an upset. But I do think that Australia finds a way to keep this close. Their team has some WNBA talent as well. Australia traditionally a really big powerhouse in women's basketball. So I think the Americans win, but not by 16 or more. And then finally, here's my favorite one. I'm going with some rhythmic gymnastics in my homeland, Bulgaria. I was born in Bulgaria, moving to the USA when I was 8 years old. So I've got to represent the Bulgarians. Give me the Bulgarian rhythmic gymnastics team to medal at plus 140. So you get great odds on that. If you put in $10, I think you win $24. And this is a bunched up field. If you look at the odds, or if you read up on past results and competitions, or even if you talk to my cousin in Bulgaria, she's a huge fan of the rhythmic gymnastics. She gave me the full preview Sunday during our Skype chat. It's a bunched up field, but if you look at, Russia's going to win the gold medal. They're the favorites. Then for the silver and bronze, Bulgaria, Israel, and Japan are all in the mix. But Bulgaria is a slight favorite over Israel and Japan, in part because of how well they performed in 2019, the last major competition we saw. And also, you got to keep in mind, Bulgaria has a rich tradition of rhythmic gymnastics. They got bronze in the last Olympics in Rio. I expect them to get silver or bronze once again and medal for me.
Exciting.
I'll be watching it. I think Thursday, Friday, and Saturday we'll have some rhythmic gymnastics on in the Enchev household. I'll be watching with my mom, and then we'll be Skyping with Bulgaria to discuss the results with my cousin and aunt. I am greatly excited for it.
Sounds like a fun event. Best of luck to the Bulgarian team.
Absolutely. Thank you. Only 1 medal so far for Bulgaria, which is much worse than they perform. I think they're like 23rd or 24th, 25th, somewhere in the top 25 in all-time medals. And if you account for Bulgaria's small population, they're actually one of the most successful countries in the Olympics per population historically. I think for sure in the top 10. But in recent years, ever since the Athens games in '04, Bulgaria has not been performing as well as they have in the past. And this is probably their worst Olympics to date with only one medal. So they need to pull it out. Rhythmic. They're going to pull it out in rhythmic gymnastics.
There you go. Statements?
You first, Drew.
Sure. Well, we've made it to August. So that means that last week was the last week without football.
Yeah.
Until February. So happy football season. Starting this week, we'll have football every single week until the Super Bowl concludes. So even if it's preseason.
I'm looking forward to it. I hit on that earlier. Tom, what do you have?
I have humans are not strictly assets. We had this little snafu coming out with New York Mets owner Steve Cohen tweeting shortly after the deadline to sign MLB draft picks. Education time. Baseball draft picks are worth up to 5 times their slot value to baseball clubs. I never shy away from investments that make me that type of return. The thing that prompts this is the fact that the Mets did not sign their top 10 draft pick, Vanderbilt pitcher Kumar Rocker, citing issues with his arm, his elbow. He had some declining velocities throughout the season, and this is the reason why the Mets did not sign him, essentially letting their signing bonus slot go to waste, letting a year of his professional career go to waste. Kumar Rocker now has a couple different options. He can either just train for a year, he can go play independent league baseball, or he can go back to Vanderbilt. He is eligible to do so. But the fact that this tweet comes out is just so tone deaf on his part. You know, this kind of falls in line with what we were talking about earlier, comment about, you know, how do baseball clubs not get value back for their stars, the players in whom their fans invest and come out to these games at what are increasingly higher and higher prices, to the point that if you want to go to a game on a budget, go see a minor league affiliate, go see an independent league team, because baseball is just getting way too wealthy. And it's in part because of owners like Steve Cohen, the $16 billion man who's looking at everything like a spreadsheet. We use that term kind of derisively for the general managers and front office folks that like to use analytics. Unfortunately, that's a very true term in a very different way for MLB owners as well, who look at this as an item on their asset and losses sheet at the end of the year. Gone are the days of the George Steinbrenners. I mean, even for all the warts that Jerry Reinsdorf has for me, he's still old school enough to say, hey, I'm going to sign my guy, Tony La Russa, and within the budget parameters that I'm providing, I'm empowering my office to go for it and win this year and over the next couple of years. It's incredibly unfortunate that Cohen decided that this was an appropriate thing to tweet and say about somebody who, you know, was coming off of a pretty good year, a high-profile player who now basically has a year wasted because a team's not willing to take a risk or take an investment on him, even if there are some issues with his elbow. This feels more like he was asking for too much money, and Cohen's looking at this as, well, you're cutting into my margins if I'm giving you a bigger signing bonus. So just a really insensitive way of approaching it. I don't know how baseball fixes this problem that they have, quite frankly, of, you know, designing rookie contracts to basically pay far less value to a player that he provides to a club. If you look especially at, say, what Chris Bryant did, how much value does he bring to the Cubs versus how much they paid him over time? Something has to get fixed, I think. I don't think that there's going to be any impetus to do so, because that's going to require some hard labor negotiation. But at the very least, it's a callous and harsh thing to do.
Yeah, I think we see that the rookie contracts, though, unless you're like a top player, tend to be lower. We see the same in the NFL as a sort of like you got to earn it. But overall, I agree with you. And I think, I don't know if you remember this. This was like a few years back, before they got really good, before the cheating scandals. There was one year where the Astros had like the worst record in baseball, or one of the worst, and they had like the highest like profit that they made, even though they weren't even getting like really high attendances. It was all about kind of doing what you're talking about. And I think for me as an owner and as a human being, you got to have like some sort of pride, and like life is about more than money, because all the owners are rich. Even like the poorest owner of any of these clubs is still really, really rich. So do you want to be like really, really, really rich, or are you okay with just being really rich but still being like really good? So I couldn't agree more with you. I think it's really sad that
Mhm.
we see this, and I know that was kind of a part of baseball with the strike. I think a lot of that happened with because of the owners, or not rather the strike, but sorry, the whole COVID. Why it took them a while to
Mhm.
resume uh, after COVID. It wasn't because of COVID. It was because they couldn't agree on, who's going to make how much money, and the owners wanted more and more money. So I think it's a bad look for baseball, and baseball needs to like fix its image. Baseball always seems to have a bad look with everything. It's almost like baseball has overtaken the NFL
Hmm.
when it comes to like you've got like a bad look on
The
you,
NHL.
and NHL, yeah. And the
Yeah.
thing about baseball is baseball isn't popular enough among the youth to screw up. I think baseball has a very loyal fan base among some of its older fans, and baseball will always be there. But in terms of if you want it to be a top sport, the NFL is so popular that it could screw up whatever it wants, and it's still going to have fans. Baseball, even hockey, even to a greater extent, and even NBA, maybe to a slightly smaller, but also like if those leagues are not managed well, they can really lose a lot of fans. And baseball
Mhm.
keeps on doing this time after time after time, digging its hole.
Yeah,
So
the key basically is re-incentivize winning and profiting. You need to put those things right in line, and you'll have more owners competing for top end talent.
absolutely. As far as my statement of the week, uh, my question is almost like statement is sort of like a question and a
Hmm.
wandering. Like, I mean, first off, what in the world is going to happen in college athletics? I know we talked about this on the show last week. We talked about Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC. Now it's official. It'll be a couple years until that does happen. But now there's rumors, and it's like hard to follow what is true, what isn't true. But there's certain things out there with multiple power programs potentially joining the SEC. There was stories of other conferences trying to take the Big 12 teams, the Big 12 being completely gone. Now there's reports that the SEC and the Big 12 are talking about merging as conferences. Just a lot of crazy stuff, and a lot of it leads me to believe that no matter what happens, these Power Five, Power Six conferences that we're talking about college basketball, a lot of them may not exist, and we're going to have like more teams and less conferences. And what are they going to do? Are they going to kick out the bad teams all of a sudden? Like, can Vanderbilt get kicked out of the SEC for being bad? I mean, what's going to
Relegation.
yeah, what's going to happen? And that's the other thing. Like, what does it do for like the college bowl games, like the Rose Bowl, et cetera, with this conference tied to that conference? What does it do for the college basketball challenges? I know they do like the Big 12 SEC challenge. What is it going to do for all that? How is it going to change the bowl season? I know we're going to 12 teams, I think is what they're saying. And they're talking about like top four seeds and conference champs. Well, all of a sudden you have less conferences. How is it going to impact that? How is it going to impact March Madness? You're going to have essentially like
Hmm.
another team who might finish lower in a power league than they would have in their previous league. Are they going to prioritize them and kick out a mid major? Like, what are they going to do? How is it going to affect things? It's hard to know. It's hard to say. I think in our generation, at least, it's going to be harder to watch because of the tradition that we're losing, the rivalries and the conference affiliations that we're losing or potentially losing. Uh, I think possibly years down the road, I think for future generations, new rivalries may develop, and you can argue that we're going to see more of the top teams going against each other. So it's hard to say which way I for sure stand on this. I guess I lean more towards what Tom said last week, not wanting to see all this happen. But I mean, what is going to happen? Because it almost feels like it's inevitable what we're seeing in college sports. It's inevitable that a lot more of the powers are going to combine together in conferences, and it's I think it's going to have a lot of impact on what happens going forward.
It's not terribly dissimilar from what we are just talking about with baseball, even in terms of tradition. What they're saying is bump your feelings for chasing the dollar.
Yeah, well, and that's essentially what we had in soccer. If you remember the Super League that the
Hmm.
European powers tried to form, and ironically, it's like the fans and the popular opinion against it that ultimately caused the Super League to fold. But that's essentially what they were trying to do there. They were trying to create all the big teams coming together in one. There is something to be said that there's a sort of charm with the upsets in the lower schools. I think there's also something cool to be said about seeing like an Oklahoma and an Alabama go head to head more than we've seen before. So I mean, there's different signs to the coin, different sides, different arguments to be made, and I can't fully assess what it is until we see it happen. But I think a lot of it is about the money. That's what they're trying to do, and they're not necessarily thinking about the excitement of the fans. I think that's what it is. They're chasing the dollar, and maybe are perhaps schools worried that down the line they're going to have to pay their players. I know I've said it myself that I'm okay with players receiving name and likeness. I'm okay with players having other jobs, but I cut the line where universities are paying their players. Do these universities think all of a sudden they're going to have to pay their players down the line? Maybe is that why we're seeing them move forward to make up for revenue? Do they think there's going to be another pandemic? I mean, a lot of it is now. Like, what if we have, and we still are sort of in the middle of a pandemic, even though some people don't think we are. We sort of are, sort of aren't. Like, are they forecasting, like, what if something like this happens again? How can we make the most money? And in some ways, I get it. But on the other end, it's like, I don't know, the traditions. There's something
It,
special about the traditions.
it's kind of chicken and egg. People weren't talking as much about athletes making money when conferences and schools weren't making all that much money. But with the explosion in revenue deals and television money that's been coming in, we're seeing more and more and more. Why does the NCAA and the schools get to collect all this money from CBS and Turner Broadcast, when really, if you take away the players, there's no product available? And we look at the same thing for the bowl season. So we've actually seen it that in chasing more and more money, that's raised more and more questions about why the athletes aren't getting their cut. And I'm sure that there are different ways to do it. I'm sure that people far smarter than I could figure out how to make that solution happen. So I don't know if it's necessarily in preparation for having to pay players, or if it's let's grab every last dollar that we can while we can, and whoever comes after us can figure out what happens with the players. Like, that's how my cynical mind works, Common. I like to see the best in people, but when it comes to the people up here, I have my doubts.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. But that's the interesting thing, real quickly, because I didn't have a statement of the week. I had a few things flowing in my head, and that's one of them. It's interesting to see how in college sports, the institutions have all the power, and they can sort of like force the conference commissioners and NCAA hosts to make change. Whereas in the NFL and NBA, the players have the power. The other thing that stuck out to me this past week was Aaron Rodgers' press conference. He basically went ahead and bashed the Packers, and he was able to speak freely because he knows that they wanted him back,
Hmm.
and they got him back for 1 year. And instead, we talked about this plenty on the show last week, but now he's gone after this year, and he can say all he wants about the franchise not performing and not being good to him, and they can't do anything. They're powerless. So it's interesting to see how, regardless of what you think about the college athletes, the professional athletes have a lot of the power. The college athletes don't have as much. I do think, though, again, I'm not going to get into a whole thing about this. I do think they get a lot
Hmm.
of money, etc., through their scholarships and all that. So I'm not saying I don't really want the colleges to pay the athletes, but I am in favor of the whole name and image likeness, and I am in favor of the athletes having more of a voice, among other things, for sure. But yeah, it's a lot of rich, greedy people. Sports are a business. As much as we love the sports, we love competitions like the Olympics, which is all about the country pride. You make minimal money on the Olympics unless like you get your sponsors and stuff, but you're essentially not competing for money. We love that, and then we hate when we see the power hungry and rich people in all corporations, and that's essentially
Hmm.
what sports are. Unfortunately, they're also corporations. For me, I'm a fan of winning, and I'm a fan of winning now. As Herm Edwards says, We play to win the game. So I'm all about teams unlike the Cubs who aren't trading everyone, and I'm all about like organizations that care about tradition and they care about winning, because there is more to life in sports than money. So, anyways, I think that just about does it for this week. We'll be back next week. We'll probably recap the Olympics for a final time, and I think in the coming weeks we'll start doing some NFL previews, and we're gonna have a lot more NFL chat. We're gonna probably hype up our betting locks of the week a lot more, even in our intro, and a lot of fun times ahead. So keep it tuned to Salute Your Sports. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and more, and have a great day, everyone.